In this second part of our introductory module, we're going to talk about some of the motivations, some of the things that World's Fairs do to justify their existence, or how the purposes they're put to by their organizers. So how can we understand World's Fairs from the point of view of the messages that are delivered to the visiting public? There are a number of ways of looking at this. Fairs are very complex events, so there's often many different messages being broadcast and sent by participants. Those different messages come from a wide range of interests who use the fair to get their point across to the public. There are different layers of messages. The fair itself, overall, may have a theme or concept that it's trying to get across. There may be national and corporate pavilions that each have their own message about their view of the world. And finally, individual participants may also have a message they wish to send through their participation in the World's Fair. One way to consider fairs is that they are a broadcasting device. They say things out to the world, and the public receives what is said. In one hand, there may be a very clear message being sent by the fair or a country or a corporation. But it also depends on how the audience reacts. It has to be interpreted by visitors. And the audience interpretation may be very different from what was intended. It may be that the audience, the public, doesn't trust the source of information. And so while the message may be clear, the public may take away a very different perspective because they don't trust the source. So when we look at fairs, we have to think about what message is intended, what message is being sent. And at the same time, we have to think about how does the public see and understand, interpret that message. There are a number of scholars who have written widely on World's Fairs and provided guides to understanding symbolism and meaning. And there are several ways that we can look at participation in fairs. At the end of this module, I'll have a list of possible readings if you're interested, but certainly the work of Robert Rydell and Paul Greenhalgh on World's Fairs is a good starting point if you're interested in some of the history and symbolism of these events. One perspective is that of cultural hegemony. And this is when the fair itself or the individual pavilion is used to promote a particular worldview. You organize the fair to send a message about modernity, about progress, about technology, about power, a whole variety of reasons. Second, there is the backlash, the counter-hegemony approach. And that's when the fair is used to oppose the mainstream view, that you participate in the fair to get an alternative perspective out into the public. Another interpretation is anthropological, a fair being used to display wealth and authority by the hosts and organizers. And finally, there's an economic argument that the purpose of the fair is not so much its theme, but the fact that it is going to provide a boost to tourism and to promote the economic and urban development of the host city. So now let's look at each of these briefly in turn. Cultural hegemony. This is when you use the fair to promote a worldview. Such as Britain did in 1851, it wanted to showcase itself as a leading global economic and military power. But fairs have also had other themes and undercurrents involving racial superiority or a political agenda of the organizer. Fairs are also commonly used to justify past actions. And so the superiority of European and American values was often a center piece of World's Fairs, as these worldviews were promoted to the public, and they were also used to justify, say, colonial expansion to an audience that may not be completely clear or supportive of those actions. The way this was achieved is usually through the organization of exhibits. Often the most advanced countries and economies were placed in the middle of the fair, and their colonies were peripheral. Often minorities at a fair were put on the edge, indicating spatially that the organizers saw them as peripheral not only in global terms, but also in terms of the fair itself. Where a pavilion, where a display is located inside the fair is also an indicator of how the host sees that group or that country. The counter-hegemony approach is when the fair provides a platform for groups that don't have a voice, or they wish to have a greater voice in reaching the public about their perspective. Frequent examples in World's Fairs have been women, Native Americans, and African Americans. These groups were often systematically excluded. They were not part of the planning, they didn't have input into the displays or presentations, and their interests were often discounted by the organizers who had their own agenda to play out. So many groups were really excluded from the operations, the planning, and design of World's Fairs, and therefore when they had the opportunity to be heard, they used the fair to present a counter-argument to what the mainstream was showing. The anthropological point of view is that these are really ways of displaying wealth and power. It's a way for a country or a host city to say, we have the resources and money to put on a celebration, to host a fair, to show that this grand exercise is really a way of proving their role in the greater society. There are many similarities really with the potlatch practice of the Pacific Northwest, and this is a way that the excessive use of resources are used to impress visitors, to impress guests, and it's a way to show that you have the power and authority and resources to do something. This is seen in modern times through the use of a fair by a country to herald its arrival. It is now part of the advanced network of countries, or the host city has now reached global status because it's holding this event. It's a symbol of being modern, a symbol of being advanced. So the resources that go into it are really to say that as a city, as a country, we can afford to do what the rest of the advanced world is capable of doing. And the final theme that we often see, especially in World's Fairs of the last 50 to 70 years, is an economic argument. And that is, the fair is chosen not because it's a world fair, but because it's a vehicle for action around economic growth and urban revitalization. Any mega event will do. It can be the Super Bowl, the Olympics, a World's Fair, Pan American Games, any event that has the power to draw attention and the power to motivate the host city to revitalize itself will work. So the mega event is not because of what it's intrinsically designed to do, but because of what it can do for the host. Because when you have a mega event, you can justify public spending, a new airport, an improved public transit system, new parks, new roads, bridges. The host city greets the world, and to do so, it spends heavily on infrastructure investment. And the mega event is the excuse or the rationale for this heavy investment in urban redevelopment. Fairs are also helpful because they drive tourism and global branding, the marketing of the city, the host city, which gets seen globally through all forms of media, is able to use the event to further its goals of being noticed and recognized in a very crowded global market. So when we try to understand the fair, we have to also remember that fairs try to show us the best side, to show us all that is good about a place. But they also reveal a lot of divisions and prejudices. And this is particularly the case in the late 19th and early 20th century fairs and their treatment of minorities who are shown as marginalized and somehow lesser than the majority population. In some ways, they are a microcosm of the host. The host may try to hide its prejudices, but they often emerge through the forms of displays, through the exhibits, or even the placement of the different pavilions and activities. So the fair is really a real place where activities and exhibits are organized, but they're also a conceptual space of showing an idea to the world, of showing an idea to the residents of the host city and country. The value, therefore, in analyzing any mega event is that the glamour and prestige, the spectacle on the surface, often misses things, and by going beneath the surface, there is a lot to be learned and gained through analysis of what the mega event is really all about. Not its surface glamour, but really the real society beneath the event that is shaping how the world sees the host. Next, we're going to look at some of the great fairs of the 19th century, to visit some of the fairs that established the theme of World's Fairs as a powerful medium for cities to make themselves known.